Alright, let's talk about healing for sorcerers in patch 1.4. You'll notice there's a few differences to the build here on sorcerers. Most notably, Dark Resilience has been redesigned. Before, in patch 1.2 and patch 1.3, it only reduced the cost of consumption. Now, it also increases the amount of healing done by your new skill called Unnatural Preservation. Unnatural Preservation has no cost to it, so it is an absolutely free heal you should be using on yourself every 30 seconds as a Sorc healer. That means that this talent, Dark Resilience, is all about power consumption, and it's a really handy talent to have. You may have noticed that I've not taken Force Surge in this particular build. This is because Force Surge only will remove a debuff from consumption, and this debuff is a relatively small penalty because it's only a debuff on our natural regeneration rate, which is admittedly the lowest of all the classes in the game. As a sorcerer, your main way of healing yourself and healing your power is to reduce your health with consumption, get that debuff, let that consumption debuff fall off as you heal yourself in other ways. As you can see, this debuff means very little if I can pull out a lot of consumptions. While in previous patches, such as patch 1.0, it was important to use Innervate to get the Force Surge, use the Force Surge to have my quote-unquote unlimited power build. This is simply no longer the case because Force Surge no longer reduces the health of consumption. Instead, the way to regenerate power as a sorcerer these days, and let me reduce my power so that I can give a good example of this. Force Storm just happens to be the way I know how to do that. So, as a sorcerer these days is to use multiple consumptions back to back. You'll notice that the debuff, while it does overlap, it doesn't, they all share the same cooldown. So, after letting them all overlap, they all run off at the same time, and you can quickly heal yourself up and get a lot of power back. This is how we regenerate our batteries as sorcerers, is by harming ourselves. You can even have another healer heal you up as you're using consumption in order to quickly regenerate your power. It's important to remember that every single time that you use consumption, the amount of power you're regaining is greater than the amount of health you're losing. And by that I mean, not only do we have Unnatural Preservation, but even if we were just to use our regular heals, it would increase our power more than had we just waited for it to regenerate naturally. As a result of these changes, power consumption is not nearly as bad an issue for sorcerers as it once was. We have been considerably buffed on our power regeneration, and we are still the best AoE healers for raids in Star Wars: The Old Republic. Our purple ring here will heal up to 8 people. It's also important to note that our little purple ring will heal outside of its radius. So even if you're this far out of the purple ring, you are still getting healed by it. And it's important to let your raid members know that as well. As a raid healer, one of the most important things you can do is put Resurgence on before you do other things. Putting Resurgence on, your heal over time, will add the Force Bending buff. Force Bending will change what your next heal does, and you need to read here in the talent tree to see what all the different effects are. Dark Infusion has its cost reduced by 30%. Innervate is a little bit more likely to crit. Revivification has its cost reduced by 30%, and Dark Heal has its chance to crit increased by 60%. While you may be tempted to use your Force Bending buff on Dark Heal to make it crit, or Innervate to make it crit, the best use of the Force Bending buff is either on reducing the cost of Revivification or reducing the cost of Dark Infusion. Reducing the cost of these abilities is handy, whereas the crit is not so much. As a general rule, I prefer to use the Force Bending buff on Revivification because the cost is relatively high for that skill. With this in mind, our rotation as a sorcerer in healing and raids will generally be starting with Resurgence to get the Force Bending buff, then using revivification, preferably somewhere in range of us so we can heal ourselves, then moving on to innervate, preferably on the tank, then going back to resurgence again, possibly on ourselves, and attending to our power consumption needs. This means using consumption to decrease your health and increase your power if your power isn't full, using a natural preservation to make sure that it's on cooldown every 30 seconds, and from there, starting over again. Playing a sorcerer healer in Star Wars The Old Republic is a balancing act between healing other people, harming yourself, and healing yourself. You cannot depend on your natural regeneration the way that other classes can. It simply regenerates far too slowly. Your way of regenerating power is always to hurt yourself. You are your own battery. Looking back at our tree here, you'll see that I have 1 point left. This point could be placed into Force Surge to give that occasional buff there. It could be placed here for the occasional root removal and PvP. There's a lot of freedom with this particular point because you don't need it to get up to revivification, and there's not really a fantastic place to put it in other places. So, put it where you like, and roll with it. The specifics of how to heal a particular encounter are going to depend on the raid that you're facing, but I can give you some general rules. When you place down revivification, note that it heals yourself, which makes getting your power back all that much easier. Health and power are basically the same pool for a sorcerer, just different sides of it. It's a good idea to put Resurgence on the tank. This will give them an armor buff in addition to the heal over time. You'll note that Resurgence comes off cooldown before this heal over time or armor buff have worn off. This means that you shouldn't put it on the tank over and over and over again, back to back to back every time it's off cooldown, because you will be what's called overhealing, wasting healing power refreshing something you don't need to refresh. Instead, alternate between the tank and either someone who seems to be taking damage, such as a melee, or yourself, who you know will be taking damage for sure. Sorcerers do not excel at tank healing in the way that some other classes do, or emergency healing in the way other classes do. But we do have our share of emergency heals. Static Barrier is one of our best emergency heals, or damage preventers rather. This seems a little counterintuitive because it only prevents damage, not heals it. So your tank will look like they're dying even when you put Static Barrier on them so you can catch up on healing. You'll need the time from this instant cast Static Barrier so you can get other heals on the tank. Generally speaking, you still don't want to use Dark Heal except in extreme emergencies. That is because Dark Heal is very cost inefficient, and it's also health per second inefficient. Dark Infusion will actually heal for more being spammed over and over again than Dark Heal, even though Dark Heal costs more force power. There are very rare situations where your tank will literally not live the 2.3 seconds or whatever it is, depending on your alacrity rating, that it will take for that heal to happen. If your tank won't live 2.3 seconds, Dark Heal is a good idea at 1.4 seconds, or what, again, depending on your alacrity, I think it's 1.5 seconds normally. So you can almost pull Dark Heal off your hotbar. If you find yourself using it a lot, or you find yourself running out of power at times, you could throw Dark Heal off your hotbar and be fine without it, and instead just do Innervate, Static Barrier, and those kinds of things in emergency situations. Resurgence, you're going to have an instinct to put that on because it is an instant cast, but remember that the healing from Resurgence isn't instantly that big. As you can see on myself, that first 100 heal is just not that huge to start off. So in emergency situations, Static Barrier is much, much, much better. Another note I would like to harp upon as a sorcerer is that Revivification is one of your best heals for cost-efficient healing. It just depends on how many people you're healing with it. 2 people is not that many to heal with Revivification, but if you're healing 3 or more, it suddenly becomes very cost-efficient. Additionally, It allows you to use consumption more times in a row while you're standing over your own revivification. As you can see, I practically have infinite power if I simply stand in my revivification and use my unnatural preservation whenever it's off cooldown. There is always a net gain to your force by using consumption and then healing yourself. It can be a balancing act, and this is part of the skill of playing a sorcerer, knowing when, in a specific fight, it is safe to use consumption to decrease your health, and at what times it is not safe to do so. Not only does using consumption decrease your health, but since you'll have to heal yourself afterwards, you're talking about global cooldowns that prevent you from healing other people. So it's a good idea to mix this in at times that there's not a lot of damage going on. Sounds easier said than done, doesn't it? It's worth mentioning that Innervate is also very cost efficient. For single target healing, Innervate should be used pretty much whenever it's off cooldown. While Dark Infusion is a relatively good heal and is the staple of your healing at low levels, it gets a little overshadowed by all of the other tools in your tool belt at 50. I want to also take a moment to talk about things other than just healing in raids. As a healer, you're thinking, oh, healing is all that I do. But there's a lot of other roles and responsibilities you can take on as a healer once you've taken care of your own health, your own power, and the health of the tank and the raid members. You can help damage enemies such as bombardiers in Kefis. You can help pull people to reduce their aggro, using Purge to set people off of fire. There's no absolute right way to play a healer. At a certain point, you will reach a threshold in which you can do a lot of other things to make up for other people's shortcomings. This is the mark of a truly great healer, and if you want to be a truly great healer, you have to have an open mind about what you can do to help your raid kill the boss, including damaging things when you have a chance. I'm not going to spend more time talking about healing, as my 1.2 guide is still available and covers a lot of the same material. I've covered the changes here so that you know exactly what kinds of things are different in patch 1.4. But sorcerers are largely the same in patch 1.4 as they were in patch 1.2 and 1.3. One of the things that is new in patch 1.4 is going to be gear. So the next section will be about gearing up in patch 1.4. Alright, so I don't have a lot of time to record, and I'm too busy playing the live game, but let me show you the gear, because actually gear is a very important part of gearing up in patch 1.4. Well, gear is an important part of gearing up. It's an important part of endgame in patch 1.4. I'm going to do this all in one take because I don't have time to do multiple takes, so when I make mistakes like that, it'll just be the way it is, and that's the way it is. So here's the Dread Guard Force Master's Focus, and you'll notice something interesting about it. It is fully moddable, so you can actually get the focus, pull the mods out, and slap them into whatever you want. You could get just the focus over and over again. By the same token, if you had the token for, say, the campaign boots that you got from, say, Nightmare Pilgrim, you can always pull the mods out, whichever one you want, over and over again. The only mod that is tied to the spot, or the slot rather, is the armoring mod. So with the focus, I don't have the drop on the focus, and I can't buy it with black hole tokens, so I can't take that. So I can't show you if that particular armoring mod on the focus is bind only to focuses. So I don't know that. But let me just give you my general idea of what the gear is like in patch 1.4. So you'll notice that it's a little bit of an upgrade over black hole gear and over campaign gear. And when I say a little bit, I mean a real little bit, like not that big. It's actually a fairly small upgrade. That being said, it is an upgrade. The gear from the new Dreadguard gear tends to be pretty heavy in crit. If you were to wear this Dreadguard gear as it is, wearing it